Chicago knows how to kick off a new year right, and that's with good food and plenty of options. You already know what I'm talking about. Chicago Restaurant Week is back in full effect from January 23rd through February 28th. The 19th annual event produced by Choose Chicago features prefix menus. I'm talking $30 for lunch, $45 or $60 for dinner at, get this y'all, more than 500 restaurants across the city. You can go to the website to see the full list or filter by cuisine type. You can use the map feature, but here's a little tip for you. Go on and make your reservations now because they go quick. Explore participating restaurants and menus at chicagorestaurantweek.com and book those tables now. If you're looking for a magical night out in Chicago, then you got to head over to Teatro Zinzanni. It's more than just dinner and a show. It's comedy, music, acrobatics, it's Cirque, all under an intimate tent atop the Cambria Hotel in the Loop. Trust me, I pulled up on them. They have some powerhouse singers. The acrobatics is out of this world. And if you sit close enough, you might find yourself a part of the show that evening. And you can use code CityCast for $20 off tickets through February 28th at zinzanni.com/Chicago. Today on CityCast Chicago, we are back and catching up on some of the biggest stories around the city, including the closure of the State and Lake CTA station, what went down with the city budget, and the Bears playoff outlook. Yes, playoffs? We talk about the playoffs. It's Tuesday, January 6th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. I've got executive producer Simone Alicea in the building. Welcome to 5 years strong, my friend.
Hey, Jacoby. Welcome to 2026.
Oh, my God. I mean, you probably did a lot during your holiday, but what was the best thing you did? And you could say sleeping in multiple days in a row. What was the best thing you did over the last week and a half?
The sleep was a solid second. I think the best thing was my boyfriend came to Seattle to hang out with my family for Christmas. And it was a lovely time. It was his first time in Seattle. Got out on a boat, which is what I always recommend. And we saw the buildings. We saw, I got to info dump on him and all the things I know about that city. So yeah, it was a great time.
I will say my two favorite things over the holidays. One, I bought my nieces Legos, and the faces they had in the pictures of opening those up, as some people may know, I just started building Legos in March of last year for the first time, and I've already been able to share that.
You got quite a collection of really interesting builds. Yeah.
I got a bunch for Christmas. I did 2 over the weekend while watching the last week of the NFL regular season. And so I think I'm up to maybe close to 20. I think I have close to 20.
Wow. And now you're instilling that in your nieces.
Yes. And so my oldest niece, Zion, her 10th birthday is at the end of the month. And so I think I'm going to go all out and get her a big one. That takes a lot of time for her and her little sister to do. But then the second thing, which will transition us right into our number one story, is, Simone, after years and years of grinding, you are looking at a fantasy football champion.
What?
Yesterday, I finally won my fantasy football league, and I immediately called Darius, my homie who is the commissioner of our league, and I rapped the entire Meek Mill Dreams and Nightmares a cappella because I've been telling him all year I was going to win.
Did your win include some Bears players?
The best part, I was playing the person who started Caleb Williams, and unfortunately, while he did have a nice fourth quarter, it wasn't enough to neither become the first 4,000-yard passer in Bears history, even though he did break the Bears franchise record single season for passing yards. But it also was not enough points to help my boy Danny come back. So yeah, I've been riding high, Simone. I've been riding high. And that's in fantasy football, but also in real life football. I'm feeling good as well.
And that's because the Bears won the NFC North They are headed to the playoffs in the number 2 seed,
Yes.
which is wild because both of those things happened. Division champs, number 2 seed, as a result of losses
From
like
other people.
games. Yeah, losses by other people, even though they have lost the past 2 games. They lost on Sunday against the Lions. They lost to the Niners the week before that. But both really close, kind of intense games, as it has been all season, it seems like.
No, 100%. I don't know why the Bears really like pain. I don't know what their obsession is.
They've always liked pain, Jacoby.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. This Bears team,
it's a different kind of pain, a different flavor of pain.
This season loves the edge, right? They love thrilling ends. They like being in the game all the way. I will say, the Packers lost a few weeks ago. We had a chance, fourth quarter, fourth down to win the game. 49ers a couple weeks ago had a chance, fourth quarter, win the game. The Lions, we had a chance, fourth quarter to win the game. In fact, I think there have only been 2 losses that we've had in which we didn't really have a chance towards the end. And so it sucked, once again, watching 3 quarters of stale, flaccid Bears offense. And then at the end of the game, they just remind us that, in fact, they can score with any team in football. They have one of the most talented offenses in the league, despite having the most accumulated injury time of any team. And so, yeah, riding a 2-game losing streak into the playoffs sucks. But these losses, because it at least says we don't quit. We don't give up. We are going to fight to the end. But at the same time, they're both losses that, we sort of put ourselves in this position to have to scrap and claw back, when maybe if we would have just played, a little more sound to start the game, to go from putting up 38 points to 0 points through 3 quarters the very next week. Sometimes you wonder, do I know who these Bears even are?
Do they know who they are?
And luckily, I don't think anybody in the NFL knows who they are this season, Simone. So as much as it is confusing week after week to be a Bears fan, I think it's confusing to be a fan of any team. I would argue Seattle and Denver, who have the number 1 seeds in their conferences, I think both of those teams are scared. I don't think either of them feel with certainty in their heart that they're going to be playing for a Super Bowl in a month and a half. And so, I guess our position isn't the worst to be in.
So we are playing our rivals, the Packers, home at Soldier Field, right?
We are.
Yes, on Saturday.
And I went to a Packers game at home last year. It is one of the most electric buildings you will ever be in as a sports fan. And I'm going to just be real with you. I'm scared.
I was going to say, what's the prediction? What's the vibe?
To death. I think we are going to win, but I'll be honest. The other option was us playing the 49ers again. I think a loss to the 49ers at home is worlds better than a loss at home to the Packers
in the first playoff game. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a loss that Packers fans get to lord, regardless of how well their team does moving forward. They get to lord over us for years to come. It doesn't matter if we beat them. No, they get to hold this one.
Well, especially those Chicago Packers fans out there, of which there are many.
Yeah. And so, but I will say the upside is upping, because if we beat them, we won a Super Bowl. We just won a chip. You ask me. We just knocked y'all out the playoffs. And so this is the absolute most gut-wrenching scenario of all possible playoff scenarios. If you're a 2 seed who loses to the 7th seed, you're already a laughing stock. If you're a 2 seed who loses to a 7 seed that happens to be your division rival in the oldest rivalry in the game, I've been saying it for weeks now. Everything else is gravy. That would be the opposite. That you take the turkey and throw it in the trash.
Well, we'll check in next week after the game. I'll see. We'll have a sense of what the mood is, what the vibe is after that game on Saturday. But we had some other stories that have unfolded since we've been on a long holiday break that we wanted to check in on. But one story that is actually kind of finally actually happening this week.
We've been covering it for a couple months. But
Yes. Talk to me about the State Lake station, which is now closed for at least 3 years, or almost 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of months ago, we were kind of forecasting the different projects that were taking place, whether it's the ongoing push for the red line extension on the far south side. We know that there's been the purple red modernization happening on the north side. And then another one of the big capital projects was the forthcoming, at the time, shutdown of State Lake. I walked past it over the weekend. The street is completely blocked off. It sits right next to the Chicago Theater. And so if you have to go there for any reason, or if you're down there trying to get to Macy's or something, or you attend Harold Washington, you are going to be impacted by the traffic. It's going to cost roughly $444 million. This station, which originally opened in 1895, is 130 years old. And so it is due for updates. From what I've seen, a lot is coming to this station, from increased sidewalk width for pedestrian safety. There will be ADA compliant elevators at all 4 corners. They're going to add in 2 escalators. Most people have probably seen the large glass canopy that will hang over the station, which I will say, them releasing a set of beautiful renderings during the budget.
I know they got you.
No, not only did the renderings get me, but I also was like, ooh, is this the right time? Because we were in that budget stalemate at the time, right? You know,
the city.
Yeah, the city was facing $1 billion deficit. And though this money is coming from a completely different part, I think Chicago, the average Chicagoan, is always concerned when they're like, hold on, what's happening right now? We're in a budget crisis, but we're about to pay $500 million for a new station.
And this station is 90% federally funded.
Exactly.
So that most of that $444 million is coming from the federal government. I will say the initial estimate for the cost of replacing this station in 2021 was $180 million, way up from the back of the envelope calculation in 2017, which was $75 million or so, upward $80 million or so. I think there's some level of cost increases in the sense of materials it's more expensive to build things now in 2026 than it was in 2021. That's just true. And that's been true of everything. I think also to some degree, there's maybe some, when they were first talking about this in 2017, 2018, they had no real, the scope of the project hadn't really been realized yet. Between 2021 and 2026, they didn't have a contract yet. They didn't actually have someone who was going to build it. So, but I think that's absolutely a fair question. Why is the cost ballooned so much? Again, this is 90% federally funded, although I can't say that that's exactly, words for comfort in this administration. The Trump administration has already threatened federal funding for transit on a number of platforms. There's been direct threats to the red line extension that you mentioned that has to do with, essentially minority contracting, right? That sort of that anti-DEI kind of thing. We've talked about that. But more recently, the federal government has threatened to withhold transit funding over safety concerns. The Transportation Department, said, CTA, you need to essentially put more cops on the train. You need to, have some kind of safety plan in place. The agency did that. CTA did that. They put forward a plan that says there's going to be more CPD. There's going to be more of these private canine security guards. But then the feds came back and said that plan is materially deficient. And now the CTA has 90 days. As far as how much money's at stake here, you're looking at some $50 million, which is just a fraction of, and, it's unclear, if that would come directly from this particular project or any of the other, that modernization project you talk about also has federal funds, right? Any of the other, projects that CTA is working on that may have federal funds coming to it. But still, it's a threat that's kind of looming over this massive construction project, which, again, the station that serves every line except the subway lines, except the red and blue, right?
So I have ridden some of the newer lines that have opened over the last few years, the Damon Green Line. I think I finally was able to take the Argyle is one of the stations that
yes,
reopened,
it's
right?
new on the red. Yeah, on the red.
Because I went up there. And I will say, all of these projects, by the end of them, headaches aside, look amazing.
Yes.
It is great to get off or onto a train.
And those old platforms, that wood platform where it gets slippery when it's wet or icy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
the platforms themselves are a lot more inviting. I also saw in the transit bill that the state passed that it looks like there are some preliminary plans to reopen the Inglewood stop on the Green Line. And so that's another station that could come online or back online in the coming years. And as someone who has increasingly ridden the L a lot more over the last few years, in fact, I was on it all of Saturday making my way out to Austin. That was to the other point. I have seen more and more police officers on the trains, more private security detail. I don't know what impact they are having, but the idea that the federal government is trying to push that the city has not made some of those adjustments, or even that they are, sort of behind what they're requiring, sort of leaves me to wonder what exactly the federal government expects the police presence to look like, because I have seen far more in the stations on the platform than I have seen it in the years prior combined.
Well, even in just the last 2 weeks, frankly.
One question and I know a lot of listeners had going into the Christmas and New Year's Eve break was, what was going to be the fate of the city budget? A group of alders came together and passed their own budget against the wishes of Mayor Brandon Johnson. And the final question remained, well, would he veto it before the December 31st deadline? I'll be honest, at the time, I was like 50-50 on this. I was like, do I think he wants to have on his record the first ever government shutdown, regardless of how we got to this point, like Chicago government shutdown? No. But he also made it very clear that he believed his plan was the better of the two options, and that, some new taxes and fees on Chicagoans would get a swift veto. Where did he come down on that?
There was no veto. The alternative budget proposal passed and is now what we have. This is the budget for 2026. As a reminder, what is in that budget, we're getting new revenue from hikes on plastic bag fees. Cities planning to sell ad space on city light poles and bridge houses. A proposal to legalize video gambling at bars and restaurants. That one's a touch controversial. They're also going to be borrowing to cover the firefighters' contract. And what is not in there is no so-called corporate head tax. This is the per employee tax that would be paid by some of the city's largest employers. That is not there. That was Johnson's proposal. Instead, most of the revenue that would have come from that tax in 2026 is being replaced by increased debt collection, and specifically selling off some city debt to private debt collectors. That's debt for things. Well, we don't know specifically yet what debt would be sold off. That is it's kind of now back in the hands of Brandon Johnson to decide how to implement this legislation.
He did sign an executive order that said he wouldn't allow for medical debt specifically to be sold off, but there are still some questions around that.
I think there are a lot of questions. The kind of debt that we're talking about here in general, when we talk about city debt, you're talking about unpaid water fines. You're talking about the biggest chunk of Chicago has a lot of unpaid debt. It's, something between like $8 and $10 billion of unpaid debt that, it has issued but has never it hasn't been able to collect on. People haven't paid them back. You're talking about things like water bills. You're talking about things like administrative hearing costs and fees. Some of it's a little unclear to me if that executive order around medical debt applies to ambulances, right? The needing to pay for ambulances. Parking tickets, red light tickets, speeding tickets, right? If you have that's considered outstanding debt, right? If you haven't paid those back. Brandon Johnson's budget did include some level of increased debt collection, right? But this proposal, the alternate proposal that City Council passed, it's just much bigger. They're saying that this will account for $90 million in revenue, or around about And, again, this sort of selling to private collectors is controversial for a lot of reasons.
I don't know if you've ever had a debt collector coming after you. They be on your ass in your email, in your phone, sending you text messages. I know people have been directly harassed by debt collectors. And as Mayor Johnson pointed out, let's be honest, the people who have backed up water bills, a good majority of them, they don't have them because they don't want to pay their water bill. In many cases, because they can't afford. And so the people who are most likely to be impacted by this are Chicago, like poorer Chicagoans, black and brown Chicagoans.
And specifically black and brown Chicagoans. Yeah. It is absolutely the case that, if you were to look at a map of who owes the city money, that's kind of how it would break down. There have been some arguments that, the city could choose to go after, debtors who have essentially go after wealthier debtors in some way. I don't quite know how that would work, or the mechanism by that.
They can't even go after faulty landlords who have years of violations and are indebted to the city in that regard.
The other thing about this plan that is, and this is what the mayor's administration said when it first came out, and one of the reasons why people thought he might veto it is his office claims that, these revenue projections, that this is going to bring in, some $90 million, it doesn't necessarily have a basis in reality. Mm-hmm. You don't know that they're going to that these private debt collectors are going to buy the debt. This is how that works. They take entrenched debt that is unlikely to get paid, right?
Package it together,
and they sell it for less than what it's actually worth, like what is actually owed. But at least they get some money. And the idea is that they get some money and not no money, right?
So say you got $1 billion in debt, you sell it for $100 million. All right, we got some. We weren't likely to get that billion, but at least we got $100 million.
Or some other fraction thereof,
exactly.
Right? And so there's no guarantee that these private debt collectors will actually buy the debt. There's no guarantee they'll buy it at the rate that is predicted here. And, the mayor even said that this could lead to, problems when we get to mid-year, including the potential for that word that everybody hates, layoffs, and other budget issues once we hit the spring and summer. It's interesting. I was reading the tribe's coverage of this, and they had a quote from Fifth Ward Alderman Desmond Yancey, which is, I believe, like South Shore Woodlawn area, right near the Obama Center. And he had a quote that I thought was kind of illustrative, and he told the tribe, "The ordinance directs the administration to sell the debt. The administration decides what debt to sell. It's my belief that the administration will not sell ticket or water debt to balance the budget." Again, there are other types of debt the administration could sell, but it's not like there's a ton of other types of debt. And so it's interesting because they've kind of punted this back to the mayor's office. They've said, no, we don't agree that we have policy disagreements about the head tax. We disagree that is the right policy to collect more revenue for the city of Chicago. We think the correct policy is, aggressive debt collection. And again, they have a point. Chicago has a lot of debt that bunch of outstanding bills that they haven't collected on. But essentially what they're saying is, we're not going to tell you what debt to collect specifically. That's up to you to figure out. And so, I will be kind of curious to see now. The question is, what will the mayor's office do with that? And I think to the original point of why didn't Johnson veto the city budget? I really do think that it has a lot to do with, I think, the timing. You have a deadline by the end of the year, and if you don't pass it by that deadline, you hit government shutdown. The fact that people were already talking shutdown, I think, was politically affecting the mayor's office. And even though there was technically another week and a half or whatever before the end of the year, I believe it was one of the city council committees had already planned a meeting for the 29th on the chance that Johnson did veto the budget. They already planned a meeting to try to override that veto, essentially, which it's also worth noting that this budget passed with 29 alders voting in support. You need 34 alders to override a veto. It's unclear. It is really unclear, and we really don't know if the city council would have had that supermajority to override the veto. This particular group that put forward the alternate proposal said they could. They said that they could get it.
They said that they believe the veto would at least motivate a few alders who were on the fence to override the veto just for the political point of it all.
And I think there's this question, and something that stuck out to me during this budget fight that I think is interesting is, right, we tend to think about the budget as being the mayor's prerogative because it's the mayor who submits the initial budget proposal. The mayor has this budget office and all these analysts and people who are crunching the numbers and doing the calculations and coming up with fiscal policy for the city of Chicago. However, fundamentally, the responsibility of the power of the purse, as they say, lies with the city council. If the budget doesn't pass in city council, there's no budget. The mayor can't unilaterally do that. Again, historically, with one major exception, the city council has sort of rubber stamped budgets or done tweaks, done sort of minor tweaks. This is one of the only times that the council has, and again, they agree. There's a lot of stuff that they agreed on. There's that they got to through compromise, right? Through going back and forth. There ended up not being a freeze on youth jobs, right? They did end up taking out that loan to pay for the firefighters contract. There was stuff that they started far apart on but came together on.
Cloud computing tax, the TIF surplus.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But this sort of like this key revenue piece, this key revenue policy that not only did they reject that and they offered up a different solution, that is the purview of the council to do so. They are the legislative branch. They write that policy. And so I think there could have been alders who would have, maybe sided with the majority there, who would have switched sides for the sake of establishing council power, right? Of establishing this is the council's role is to, finalize and write that policy. It's not actually the purview of the executive to do that. Again, it's just a bit different than the way we've seen politics get done in Chicago.
We didn't talk CTA. We didn't talk the Bears. We didn't talk big city budget. Simone, get a little personal before we get out of here. We have been, at least together, sharing our New Year's resolutions for the last few years. I don't know how successful we've been at them. I will say last year I said I wanted to get outside more. I did that. I wanted to take more pictures. I did that. So going into 2026, what is your biggest New Year's resolution for yourself?
I need to learn where these new speed cameras are and avoid those tickets.
That's the most Jacoby Cochran thing you've said in 5 years.
I know. So okay, here's the thing. So as a lot of, we've talked about this, as a lot of people know, right? The city added, dozens of new speed and red light cameras in 2025, and the ticket revenue is rolling in. Again, maybe some of that goes to collections at some point, who knows? But I got caught 3 times between August and November on the same street, a street that definitely did not used to have a speed camera. And I would just like, for the record, I would like the record to show, I am not a menace speed demon out here on these Chicago streets. I know that's hard for you to trust because I'm telling you this and the camera tells you otherwise.
Y'all, I've been in the car. Simone be getting honked at on the highway because she going too slow.
They're not red light tickets. I'm not running reds. I am merely going 6 miles over the speed limit, apparently. You know what I mean? I know
promise. Exactly what you mean, because when they announced these cameras some months ago or even last year, I remember saying this exact thing. I was like, hey, I need to get an exhaustive list of where every camera is, learn them and avoid them. And you said, Kobe, why don't you just slow the hell down?
Well, and I'm willing to slow down. I just feel like the flow of traffic, right, is what it is. And it's tough out here, so I need to learn where they are. I need to avoid them. And I will avoid them not by not driving the streets. I will avoid them by slowing down. So, the behavior that these cameras are looking to engender is going to happen. But, also I will follow the flow of traffic when as needed. But yeah, that's one of my resolutions, is to learn where the cameras are.
That's a good one.
What about you, Jacoby?
I have two. One is, technically it's not like an original New Year's resolution because I started on this last year, but it is to finish visiting every single Chicago public library. I am about halfway through now, and I can say I have been to the furthest south, furthest north, and about the furthest west. I've been to Austin, Allgale Gardens, Rogers Park, Northtown, and a bunch more in between. I've hit about 40. And my goal is to complete the back half, this back 9, before the 82nd branch opens at the Obama Center in June. I'm hoping that maybe they push it back to like July or August, but I also think I'll be able to get it done. And then my other New Year's resolution is I want to be cooking more. So I feel like the last few years I've settled into a few staples, but a few years ago I was getting real experimental, trying new dishes, cooking things that I had never done before. And I'd like to recapture that energy this year. So I'm holding myself to one unique meal a month, just something I have never done before. So I'd like to, for example, I'd like to do a full branzino, like cook a full piece of fish. Yeah. I have never done that before. I would love to, I'm gonna stick with seafood for this one, but like something like do mussels or oysters, like something like a mussels and fries, something that I love to order, but I'm like, I'd love to see what it would take to make that at the house. I'd like to do some baking this year. And so one unique dish or meal a month. That is my goal. I think that when it comes to seafood, I think sourcing it is often my like hesitation in cooking seafood at home. So, if anyone has any recs of like where to get fresh seafood in Chicago, raw seafood to cook at home, let us know. Text us 773-780-0246. Yeah, I would like to get a little more expansive in the kitchen, and I would like to finish visiting every single library. I have met some really cool people, even in just the last couple of days hitting these libraries. So yeah, those are my big ones. That's good. And just for there are 81 libraries in Chicago, or 88? 81, 80-ish. Because I just found out, because I counted 81, but then I just realized the Galewood Montclair branch hasn't reopened since the pandemic. And so I'm not sure if they're counting that one in the full 81. So there are 80 plus branches. And yeah, I'm about halfway through. I'm feeling real good about it. That's a good one. I also think in 2026, I'd like to shop as local as possible. That's always kind of a goal of mine in general. But I was like really sitting here thinking about like, and it's why I don't think I can, I don't think I can necessarily buy all local brands, for example, the individual items. However, I think, Chicago has a lot of like I was thinking about like hardware. Like there are actually a lot of like locally owned hardware shops that you can. So like I think the one near me is Crafty Beaver up here on Lawrence, and so it's like that is a kind of place that I could maybe displace any of my hardware needs to. Right. We got some big goals for 2026. As I had alluded to at the end of last year, we are going to be celebrating 5 years pretty soon on the show. First episode of the year, a lot more to go. But Simone, always a pleasure, my friend. Y'all join me in thanking executive producer Simone Alicea. Hey, thanks, Jacoby. Before we get out of here, some good news. Chicago's legendary Winter Music Festival, Tomorrow Never Knows, is back and celebrating 20 years this week. In that time, it has grown from 5 days to an entire month of shows, and trust me, they got something for everybody with over 70 acts across 9 venues. That kicks off January 8th and runs through the 31st. I'm gonna drop a link for you in the show notes. As always, I appreciate you for listening, reading, signing up to become a CityCast Chicago neighbor, and whatever way you are supporting and showing love to CityCast Chicago, we appreciate it, and we really need you to lock in over these next, 12 or so months to help make 2026 our biggest year yet. We're gonna be back bright and early tomorrow. I'll talk to you then. Peace.